Traffic laws are often passed to make the roads safer, to reduce noise, to reduce pollution, and the overall aim and the merits is not to raise revenue, but to improve the roads for all the road users and those that live around them. If you feel that a lot of the legislation is just designed to raise revenue, then let me know in the comments your thoughts on that subject. I thought it would be interesting and amusing to look at some of the unintended consequences of laws that have been passed, and let me know your experiences. If you've experienced any of these situations or other situations where a law has been passed and it has had unintended consequences. First up, my wife pointed this out to me as she was reading through the news, and a council installed a decibel meter because they had a problem with loud exhausts. And the decibel meter would basically give you a decibel reading for the loudness of your exhaust. And the aim was that people would realise their exhaust is too loud and reduce the sound and make changes to the car so the exhaust is more quiet. The unintended consequence of having this installed was it created a challenge to get the highest score you could. Rather than reduce the noise annoyance created by vehicles, it actually made it worse as people deliberately drove to this area to rev their engine and try and get a higher score. Now, the general perception and understanding is that cars moving quickly cause more serious accidents. If you can slow cars up, there are fewer accidents and fewer problems on the road. And councils all around the world have employed various methods to annoy, frustrate, or I should really say slow up a driver and slow up their progress. Speed bumps have been used on many roads to slow up the progress of drivers. Now, the aim of this is to slow the vehicles up, to reduce the annoyance of noise that comes from the vehicles, to reduce levels of pollution, and to make the roads safer. What tends to happen though with speed bumps, and I know people that live right outside streets where these have been installed, you hear vehicles crashing over them pretty much at the same speed they would have done had that speed bump not been there. Obviously depends on the type of speed bump that's been installed, but in the main they don't always slow up drivers, and you get this crashing noise of cars going over it, which becomes a big annoyance. It adds wear and tear to the road surface and the vehicles. Additionally, if these speed humps or speed bumps are effective at slowing up cars, you get periods of cars braking and then accelerating hard, which increases the levels of pollution, increases the noise output of vehicles. Rather than slowing up the progress of the cars, you've actually just created a set of additional problems by installing these speed humps. Effectively, it increases the stop-start rhythm of traffic. It can cause delays and other problems, increases congestion, and may not have the intended consequences of when it was first installed. Traffic calming goes hot on the back of speed humps. Now, traffic calming is where the road is changed in such a way, maybe they create a chicane, maybe they narrow it down to one lane, and it slows up the flow and progress of vehicles. Again, the slower cars are supposed to emit less pollution and less noise and make the roads safer. But the consequence is increased congestion. Now, you run the maths. If you do the calculations, and it's going to be different for different vehicles, but in the main, a car that does a journey in 5 minutes at a steady speed is going to emit less CO2 than a car that's done the same journey in 15 minutes with lots of stop-start progress. You want the engines to run as efficiently as possible, and a lot of traffic calming just creates congestion and slows up the overall flow of traffic. And traffic planners may say, but this is a deterrent to people buying cars. If they can't get around the town, then they're going to look for other means of transportation. Now, the reality is that that just doesn't happen. People want their cars. They feel a car is a right. Let me know what your comments are on how you feel about your car and whether it is a right or it is a privilege to have a vehicle, and whether frustrating traffic conditions has led you to make less car journeys, or whether you've just joined in with the fray and added to the problem of congestion. on our street. Speed cameras are fantastic. It's a great way of enforcing the speed limit without having to employ a person to stand there with a radar gun, pulling people over and issuing tickets. It's all very automatic. AI is taking over all aspects of traffic enforcement. So by mounting cameras high up on motorways and freeways, the regulations about using mobile phones, wearing seatbelts, speed limits and staying in the correct lane, that sort of thing can all be enforced electronically and instantly. Now, the problem with speed cameras, it does reduce the flow of traffic because cars slam on their brakes when they see a speed camera. Even if they're travelling at the posted speed limit, there is a tendency to be ultra careful, brake and slow up the car as you go through this speed trap, which creates ripples of congestion on our roads. I've also witnessed some near misses where cars have braked rather sharply to try and slow up for a speed camera, and it wasn't that car that caused the problem. There's a few cars back, the braking seems to be emphasized as other cars start braking even harder to try and avoid hitting the car in front. So you've got an amplification of the braking effect moving through the traffic, and eventually that could lead to a nasty crash. Speed cameras make the road safer? Well, not in all instances, not when you take into account the human element of a driver. In a bid to improve the environment, the local councils often mandate fewer parking places when new housing estates and developments go into planning stage. We've got whole estates near us where there is just one space per house, with most households having 2 cars. You've got an excess of cars. They have helpfully installed bike storage facilities, and they've also instituted bus routes that go around this estate. But because people aren't using the buses are very irregular and not particularly reliable. The cycle facilities are pretty much not used. The intention was to force people into using more eco-friendly means of transportation, but the reality is that the human element, the driver wants to hang on to their car, and they just add to the inconvenience and the problem and the frustration. And this often moves the parking problem out to new areas where out of town housing developments have been created with this very restricted parking philosophy. The cars have had to park somewhere, and the nearby streets have ended up campaigning to get double yellow lines fitted because all the streets are filling up with cars and the overspill from this close. And again, the problem just moves. It doesn't go away. It doesn't fix the problem. People have cars, they need to park them, and often they'll be using a lot more fuel driving round and round the block trying to find a parking place. Having lived in an area where parking is difficult, I was driving 15 minutes around the block until I found a space that I could park in. Now that is a terrific waste of fuel. It's adding congestion to the road, it's adding pollution, it's creating noise. And I think a lot of the situations where local councils want to frustrate and annoy the driver with the intention of driving to other forms of transport, it's not working. They may raise extra revenue in fines and parking permits, but the upshot is that they are not improving the environment by adding all of these parking restrictions. It's the same when you go to park in town near the shops. There's usually pay parking or restricted zone parking where you can park for 1 hour or 2 hours and you're not allowed back into that zone for another 2-hour period, or 4 hours in some places in our town. Now, this has often shut down the shops in the high street. The out-of-town shopping centres with free parking, unlimited parking, are obviously much easier for the motorist to go to. Rather than take a short trip down the town to your local shops, you're now driving out of town, covering more distance, putting more miles on your car, burning more fuel to use these out-of-town shopping areas. And shops and commutes are moving further away from people, from residential areas, creating more of a problem where people have to commute longer distances to get to work. We've also covered a lot of the safety tech that goes into cars, lane assist, speed warning systems, and other various safety devices that have been electronically installed in modern cars. And these on paper make the car more safe, but the reality of living with these systems is frustrating and distracting to the driver. Reading through the comments, people have noted that they've had near misses where the auto braking has picked up on something it shouldn't have, or the car has got bad speed limit limit information, and it has slowed the car up unnecessarily because maybe a nearby zone is lower and it interpreted that as the prevailing speed limit that the person was currently driving along. And that causes all sorts of problems and tailbacks behind. And not least of this is the fact that the driver is distracted fighting with these systems, fighting with the warnings that are flashing up, the little reminders intended to make the road safer, and you're just distracting the driver, making his job harder to concentrate on safely driving the car. Most of these things we've discussed, they sound great on paper until you get the human element, until a driver is involved. And in the main, a lot of these things that have been intended to improve the environment or make our lives safer and easier have actually done the complete opposite. It would be nice if local authorities and town planners employed some common sense, but common sense isn't actually that common, unfortunately. And with pressure brought on them by road safety, environmental groups and other campaigning groups, they've got to be seen to making changes to the transport system to nudge people toward more environmentally friendly means of transportation. I would strongly argue that getting cars from A to B as quickly as possible is the best solution. The cars are on the road for a shorter period of time. The cars are working in their efficient power band. They're not dribbling out, spitting out lots of low RPM pollution all the time. And also the cars need less repairs. They're not crashing through speed bumps. There's not great amounts of braking involved to try and slow the car up to go through these chicanes and other traffic calming measures. Let me know what your thoughts are, and if you've got a solution to maximising the flow of traffic through your local area and changes that can be made. Some councils have actually tried removing signs and removing traffic lights in order to force drivers to concentrate, and that has in some cases made things much safer. But often after a period of time, drivers get used to it and become complacent. What is the solution? What is the answer? Let me know in the comments. I really do enjoy reading through your comments. Thanks for watching. Please boot the like button. That really does help us to get out there. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. About 97% of you haven't subscribed, and that really does help the channel to get out there in the algorithm. And I've lined this video and this playlist up for you that you should find really interesting. Thanks for watching. See you in this next video.